Everything started when my wife opened the front door. Two men stood there wearing cheap HOA officer vests. They didn't smile. They didn't explain. "You broke the rules," one said. "Pay $100 right now." My wife stayed calm and tried to talk to them, but these men weren't real officers. They were scammers. When she refused to give them money, one of the men grabbed her arm. She pulled away. Then he did the unthinkable. He punched her. What the fake officers didn't know was, my wife wasn't alone. Standing right behind her was her husband, a trained Navy SEAL. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. My wife opened the front door expecting a simple morning package. Maybe the new garden lights she ordered, maybe a book. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual, just a normal day in our quiet neighborhood. But instead of a delivery driver, two men stood on the porch wearing cheap blue vests with the words HOA officer printed on them. The letters were crooked, like they had ironed them on themselves. Their badges looked shiny but plastic, and their boots were too clean for real enforcement officers. My wife didn't know it yet, but these two were not here for community safety. They were here for money. "You broke the rules," the taller man said, stepping forward like he owned the entire property. "You owe $100 for a violation. Pay it now or things will get worse." My wife blinked in confusion. "I didn't break any rules," she said politely. "Can I please see the official notice?" The shorter man scoffed. "We already gave you the notice." "No," she said calmly. "You didn't. And you're not allowed to demand money without real paperwork." That was the moment everything changed. The taller man's face twisted with anger, the kind of anger cowards show when someone doesn't fall for their scare tactics. He leaned in too close, his voice rough and threatening. "Lady, just pay or you'll regret it." My wife stepped back, uncomfortable but still trying to stay respectful. She had dealt with pushy people before, but not like these men. She reached for her phone. "Maybe I should call the real HOA and confirm." The taller man snapped. He grabbed her wrist hard, his fingers digging into her skin. She gasped and tried to pull away. The shorter man laughed like it was a joke. And then, in one fast, ugly moment, the taller man lifted his free hand and punched her. The sound wasn't loud, just a quick, sharp thud, but it was enough to freeze the entire world around us. My wife stumbled backward, holding her cheek, shocked and hurt. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stared at them, confused, scared, and trying to understand how asking for proof could lead to violence. The fake officers didn't even look sorry. They didn't regret it. They didn't even hesitate. The taller one smirked. That's what happens when you don't cooperate. But what they didn't notice, what they weren't paying attention to, was the tall figure standing just a few feet behind her inside the house. Me, her husband, a man trained for moments far more dangerous than this. A man who had spent years overseas learning how to stay calm under pressure and how to end fights before they even start. A Navy SEAL. I stepped forward slowly, my hand gently touching my wife's back to steady her. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She nodded weakly, still shaking. The scammers finally noticed me then. The shorter one frowned. "Who's this?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at the man who hit my wife. My face stayed calm, but inside a switch flipped. The same switch that flips when a soldier sees a threat that has passed the line from disrespect to violence. "You need to leave," I said quietly. The taller scammer scoffed. "Oh yeah? And if we don't?" I took one more step forward, and the sunlight hit my face. The scammer saw the expression in my eyes. Not anger, not fear, but the cold, steady focus of someone who had been trained to control chaos. Someone who knew exactly how to end danger. The shorter man's smile faded. "Dude, something's wrong." But it was already too late. They had crossed the line the moment they touched my wife, and nothing would protect them now. Not their fake badges, not their tough voices, not their scare tactics. They thought they were intimidating a helpless woman. Instead, they just attacked the wife of a Navy SEAL. Brad and Tyler were not the kind of criminals you see in movies. They weren't smart, they weren't skilled, and they weren't brave. They were two men who liked easy money and believed they looked tougher than they really were. Most days they sat in Brad's messy garage, scrolling through social media and complaining about how life isn't fair. Neither of them had a steady job. Neither wanted one. They loved shortcuts, especially shortcuts that involved scaring people. Then one day, Tyler found a video online about fake HOA fines. "People fall for this," he shouted. "All you need is a vest and a clipboard. They'll pay anything to avoid trouble." And from that moment, their little scam was born. They ordered blue vests from a cheap website, the kind that shipped in thin plastic bags with a strong chemical smell. They stuck vinyl letters on the back that said HOA officer. Even though the letters peeled at the edges and were crooked enough to look like a kid put them on. Then they bought shiny badges from a novelty store, badges meant for costumes, not enforcement, but from far away they looked real enough. "Boom," Tyler said proudly, standing in front of the mirror. "We look official. No one will question us," Brad added. "People in nice neighborhoods hate problems. They'll pay just to make us leave." And for a while, it worked. They picked quiet houses first, places where elderly couples lived. If the husband answered the door, they lied about late fees or unapproved decorations. If the wife answered, they used a harsher tone, the kind of tone that made people nervous. "We can file this with the county," Brad would say. "That'll be a $200 fine," Tyler added. Or, Brad offered, "You can pay us now and avoid any trouble." Most people paid. They didn't want to fight. They didn't want paperwork. They just wanted peace in their day. So Brad and Tyler left each house with cash in their pockets, laughing as they drove away. "I told you," Tyler bragged, "people are scared of uniforms, even fake ones, but scaring honest people wasn't enough for them. Soon they wanted more money faster. "We need bigger houses," Brad said one night. "Yeah," Tyler agreed. "People with money don't argue. They'll just hand it over." That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was much worse. They started targeting homes where only a woman answered the door because they thought women would be easier to intimidate. "That's just smart business," Tyler said, not realizing how cruel he sounded. And then came their third mistake, the mistake that destroyed their entire operation. They dared to knock on my door. They didn't research who lived there. They didn't look up my background. They didn't notice my military flags beside the porch. They saw only my wife walking to the door and thought they had found the perfect target. Tyler nudged Brad as my wife stepped outside. "Piece of cake," he muttered. Brad grinned. "She looks nervous already." But she wasn't nervous. She was confused, and confusion wasn't the reaction they expected. Most of their victims became scared fast, which made the scam easier. But my wife kept asking questions, simple, direct questions they couldn't answer. "Where's the official notice? Why didn't I receive anything in the mail? What's your badge number?" Every question made Tyler more annoyed. Every question made Brad more aggressive. And when people like them get frustrated, they get sloppy. "Just pay," Tyler snapped. "We don't have to show you anything," Brad yelled. My wife didn't let their shouting scare her. She tried once more to calmly explain that nothing made sense, but Brad and Tyler weren't listening anymore. They relied on intimidation, not logic, and when intimidation didn't work, they jumped straight to violence. Tyler grabbed her wrist. Brad punched her. To them, it wasn't a big deal. They believed she was alone. They believed she couldn't fight back. They believed no one would defend her. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to check, was that I was home, a Navy SEAL, a man trained to recognize danger instantly, a man trained to stay calm even when chaos explodes, a man trained to eliminate threats before they can cause more harm, and they had brought the fight right to my front door. Brad smirked after punching her, thinking he had won. Tyler let go of her wrist, thinking the scam was still in their control. But then I stepped forward. They didn't even look at me at first. Just another husband to shout at, just another person to scare. "Stay out of this," Brad barked, puffing out his chest. "You want some too?" Tyler added. But when the sunlight hit my face and my expression didn't change, when they saw no fear, no panic, no hesitation, their confidence cracked. Who are you?" Tyler asked, his voice suddenly unsure. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My stance, my eyes, my silence. Everything told them exactly what they had awakened. Their scam had finally run into someone who wouldn't fold, wouldn't run, and wouldn't be intimidated. They hadn't just chosen the wrong house. They had chosen the worst possible house. And the moment they realized it, the fear in their eyes was real for the first time, because they were about to learn what happens when fake officers cross a line they can never uncross. When Brad's punch landed, time seemed to slow down. My wife stumbled backward, shock written all over her face. She didn't scream. She didn't fall, she simply froze, the way people do when something so unexpected happens that the mind can't understand it right away. I reached out and caught her before she lost balance, my hands steady on her shoulders. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and watering. He hit me, she whispered. I felt something in my chest tighten, not anger, not rage, but a sharpened focus I had learned long ago. In the military, we were trained for moments like this, moments where everything suddenly becomes crystal clear. The two fake HOA officers were still laughing, not realizing the danger they had just created for themselves. They weren't looking at my wife anymore. They weren't even looking at me. They were joking with each other, proud of themselves, oblivious to the shift in the air. See? Tyler snorted. Easy. She should have just paid. Yeah, Brad said. People like her always fold. I took a slow breath. Then I stepped forward. One step. That was all it took to change the entire direction of the day. My movement was calm, too calm for men like them. Not rush, not wild, just steady, controlled. My wife felt the change immediately. She touched my arm gently. Please, don't do anything crazy, she whispered. I won't, I said softly. Just stay behind me. The scammers finally noticed me then. Tyler frowned. Who's this guy? Brad shrugged. Probably her husband. Relax. He won't do anything. They had no idea. Step away from my wife, I said quietly. Brad laughed right in my face. Or what? You gonna call the cops? I didn't answer. Instead, I took one more step forward, letting the sunlight fall across my shoulders. My stance shifted slightly. Not enough to look threatening, but enough for someone trained. Move with precision. Tyler saw the look in my eyes first. His smile faded. His eyebrows lowered slowly, like a man realizing something too late. Then he whispered to Brad, Dude, something's wrong, Brad scoffed. What's wrong? He's just standing. No, Tyler said under his breath. Look at him. Something's off. Brad finally looked closely, not at my size, not at my expression, but at my posture. My feet were evenly spaced, my shoulders relaxed, my breathing steady, my eyes locked on both of them without blinking, not aggressive, not scared, just calculated. That kind of calm doesn't come from everyday life. It comes from training, serious, disciplined training that doesn't disappear. Brad swallowed. Who are you? I didn't answer that either. In situations like this, names didn't matter. Warnings didn't matter. What mattered was control, and I had all of it. What did you just do to my wife? I asked him. Brad's mouth opened, then closed again. It was a misunderstanding, he stuttered. She grabbed me first. She didn't, I said. Tyler stepped back a little. We didn't know she was married, okay? We thought she was alone. And that makes it better? I asked. Both men stared at me, but they still didn't understand what was happening. Tyler lifted his hands. Look, man, we don't want trouble. We just came to collect a fee. That's all. My voice stayed calm. There is no fee. Brad looked away nervously. Okay, then, we'll leave. We don't need to stay here. You're not going anywhere, I replied. The words hit them harder than anything physical could have. Tyler looked confused. Why not? The lady is fine. It's over. I took another controlled step toward them. It's not over. Everything about Brad's body language shifted at once. His shoulders tensed. His breath grew shallow. A cold sweat appeared on his forehead. You need to back off, he said, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked halfway through. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ball my fists. I didn't even threaten them. I just stared, quiet, focused, watching every tiny movement they made. And that's what scared them. Not yelling, not threats, not swinging fists, silence, control, training. These were things they had never faced in their lives. Brad whispered, Tyler, I think we messed up. Tyler nodded quickly. Yeah, dude, big time. My wife stepped beside me, holding the side of her face where she'd been hit. Her voice shook as she said, You don't get to hurt people and walk away. Brad tried to take a step back. I mirrored his movement with one forward. He instantly froze. Okay, he said, raising his palms. Just tell us what you want, what I wanted. I wanted them to understand what happens when you decide to hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You hit the wrong woman, I said softly. The words made Tyler inhale sharply. Brad stared at me, his voice trembling. Please, don't do anything. We're sorry. They weren't sorry. They were scared. And now they finally understood they weren't dealing with a normal husband. My wife whispered behind me, He doesn't know who you are. Tyler swallowed hard. Who are you? I finally gave him a small answer. Not loud, not dramatic, just the truth spoken plainly. I'm somebody you should never have laid a hand on. Their eyes widened as the last pieces started falling into place. The stance, the silence, the precision, the discipline. Then Brad mouthed the words quietly, as if afraid to say them out loud. Navy SEAL. He was right. Tyler was the first one to move. He didn't think, he didn't plan. He just reacted the way scared people do, with stupid, sudden violence. He lunged toward me with both hands out like he was trying. He just shoved me backward through my own doorway. But before his palms even touched my shirt, I had already moved. Training kicks in faster than thought, faster than fear, faster than anger. Years of Navy SEAL drills taught my body what to do long before my brain caught up. I shifted my weight, stepped to the side, caught his wrist and turned it. Not hard, not even fast, just precise. His momentum did the rest. Tyler's body flipped forward as if gravity itself yanked him down. His back hit the porch first, then his arm twisted underneath him in a position the human arm was never meant to take. He screamed, a sharp, panicked sound that cut through the air and made the birds scatter from the nearby trees. Brad froze for half a second, wide-eyed, watching his friend drop like a sack of tools. What did you do to him?" Brad shouted. I didn't answer. Brad took that silence as permission to run. He turned sharply, trying to bolt off the porch and sprint to the driveway. But he didn't even get one full step. I grabbed the back of his cheap HOA officer vest and pulled. His legs kept moving forward for a split second, but his torso didn't. He stumbled, arms flailing, and I spun him around with a controlled motion that sent him down onto the wooden porch floor, flat on his stomach. He hit the boards with a heavy thud. The breath rushed out of him in a gasp. He didn't scream like Tyler. Not yet, but when he tried to get up, I placed one knee between his shoulder blades, heavy enough to hold him down, light enough not to hurt him unnecessarily. Stay still, I said. Shock finally hit them both. Tyler lay on his side, clutching his arm, eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Brad wheezed into the porch floor, trying to catch his breath, trying to make sense of how two men who had played tough all morning were now pinned by someone who hadn't even broken a sweat. Please, please, Brad stuttered. We didn't know who she was. My voice stayed steady and calm. You didn't need to know who she was. You just needed to not hit her, Tyler groaned. Man, my arm, I think it's broken. It's not, I said. It just hurts because you fought back at the wrong time. He whimpered like a child. My wife stood near the doorway, still shaking from the punch she had endured, but now her breathing was slower, more controlled. She watched as the two attackers lay helpless on her porch, the same porch where they had tried to intimidate her minutes earlier. I looked up at her. You okay? I asked gently, my voice softening. She nodded weakly, touching the red spot on her cheek. I'm okay now, she whispered. Her eyes glistened, not just from pain, but from relief. Relief that these men couldn't hurt her anymore. Relief that the danger was over. Relief that she wasn't alone in it. Brad finally found his voice again. Please, man, just let us go. We'll leave. We won't bother you again. I tightened my hold just slightly to remind him he wasn't in charge of anything. You should have thought of that before you came to my house with fake badges, I said. Tyler pushed himself upright against the railing, breathing hard. You don't understand, he groaned. We just needed money. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You made it go this far, I replied. You grabbed my wife. You hit her. That was your decision. Brad shook his head quickly, his cheeks still pressed to the porch. We panicked. People usually pay. We didn't think. That's your problem, I cut in quietly. You didn't think. My wife stepped closer, her voice stronger than before. What you did wasn't a mistake, she said. It was a choice. Brad shut his eyes, like her words hurt more than anything I had done to him. Tyler swallowed hard. Look, man, can we please him? Ache a deal? We'll give back the money we took. We'll stop doing this scam. Just don't call the cops. I glanced at him. Why? I asked. So you can try the same scam somewhere else? Hurt someone else's wife? Scare another family? Tyler wiped sweat from his forehead. No, we swear, we're done. We're completely done. Brad nodded as much as he could with my knee holding him down. We'll change, I promise. But I had heard promises like that before, from men who chose the easy path, the illegal path, the dangerous path, and promises made out of fear rarely last longer than the moment. Still, I didn't answer them, not yet. I simply kept them pinned, letting them feel the weight of the choice they made and the consequences they had earned. The porch was quiet, except for their breathing, The air was heavy with heat and tension, but underneath it all, there was something else. The moment before justice arrives, my wife looked at me. "Should we call 911?" she asked softly. I shook my head once. Already did. Brad and Tyler stiffened. "What?" Brad shouted. No, you can't. We said we're sorry." "You're not sorry," I said calmly. "You're scared. There's a difference." Tyler's eyes darted toward the street. "Please, man, cops will ruin our lives. You ruined your own lives the moment you decided to pretend to be officers," I answered. My wife stepped beside me, gently resting her hand on my arm. "The real officers will be here soon," I said quietly, "and you'll explain to them why you showed up at our door with fake badges and why you punched a woman." Neither of them argued again, because they knew, finally, fully, that the moment their fists touched my wife, their fate was sealed. And this time, they weren't getting up. My wife had barely ended the 911 call when I heard the distant sound of sirens, not loud, not dramatic, just a steady, rising wail, growing closer with every second. Brad and Tyler stiffened beneath me. Are those for us?" Brad asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I said simply. Tyler groaned and grabbed his head. Oh man, we're screwed." I didn't respond. I just kept them pinned, not hurting them, not pushing too hard, just making sure they didn't get any bright ideas before the real officers arrived. My wife stood beside me, one hand on her cheek, the other holding the porch railing for support. Her breathing was steadier now. Her fear had changed into something else, quiet strength. She stayed close because she wanted to see justice happen with her own eyes. Minutes later, the police cruiser rolled into our driveway. Blue and red lights reflected across the porch, the house, the windows, and even the scammers' terrified faces. Two deputies stepped out. Deputy Miller, a familiar face in our town, and Deputy Reyes, younger but sharp-eyed. The moment they saw two grown men pinned to my porch with my knee on one and my foot on the other, they both raised their eyebrows. This wasn't the kind of call they expected in a quiet neighborhood. Deputy Miller approached slowly. "Sir," he said to me, "I'm going to need you to tell me what happened." He kept his voice calm, but he was clearly trying to figure out why a man he had seen at community events now had two strangers restrained like they were dangerous criminals. My wife stepped forward before I could answer. "They pretended to be HOA officers," she said. "They demanded money. And when I asked questions, they hit me." Both deputies turned to look at her, at the red mark on her face, at the way she held one arm protectively across her body. Reyes frowned. "You hit a woman?" he asked the scammers. Brad groaned into the porch floor. "It was an accident." "You punched her," my wife corrected sharply. "There was nothing accidental about it." Tyler shook his head wildly, his voice cracking. "He started it. He attacked us. You need to arrest him." Deputy Miller turned to me. I remained silent, steady, calm, exactly the way I had been since the moment this started. My wife placed a gentle hand on my arm. "He's a Navy SEAL," she said softly. The deputies paused. Everything clicked in their minds at once. The stance, the controlled breathing, the precise way the scammers were held down without injury, the calm, disciplined expression on my face. Deputy Reyes straightened his posture. "Oh," he said quietly, "that explains it." Deputy Miller nodded once, slowly. "I see." Brad lifted his head just enough to look up at me, then at the deputies. "Navy SEAL?" he shouted. "You never said anything about that." I looked down at him. "You didn't ask." Tyler groaned dramatically. "Oh, great. He's military. We're dead." Reyes crouched beside him. "What made you think pretending to be HOA officers was a good idea?" Tyler opened and closed his mouth like a fish. Then he pointed at Brad. "It was his idea." "Shut up, Tyler," Brad snapped. "You said nobody would fight back." "Not him," Tyler shouted. "Look at the guy." Deputy Miller sighed. He had seen enough. "All right," he said, "both of you are being detained for questioning." Tyler panicked instantly. No, please. We didn't mean to hurt her. It was just a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," my wife said, her voice firm. "You came to my home pretending to be something you're not. You grabbed me, you hit me, and you would have kept going if my husband hadn't been here." Her words silenced everyone for a moment. Even the wind seemed to pause. Reyes helped me lift Brad from the porch. He groaned the whole way, acting like he was the victim. "My ribs hurt," he complained. "You were sitting on me. I was holding you still." I corrected. Well, you did a great job, Reyes muttered. He's not moving anywhere. Tyler stood shakily, holding his arm. It hurts. It really hurts. It's not broken, I told him again. You just twisted it when you tried to attack me. Reyes raised an eyebrow. You tried to attack a Navy SEAL? Tyler didn't answer. He just stared at the ground. Deputy Miller stepped aside to speak with my wife. Ma'am, we're very sorry this happened. We'll take both men in for questioning. They'll face charges. My wife nodded, her voice quieter now. Thank you. You did the right thing, calling us, he added. She looked at me. I wasn't scared once he stepped forward. Reyes gave a small smile. Yeah. I don't think anyone would be. Brad and Tyler were finally cuffed and led toward the cruiser. Their legs shook with every step. Just before Brad ducked into the back seat, he looked at me one last time. You could have broken us in half, he said quietly. Why didn't you? I met his eyes, because I'm not like you. He swallowed hard, and for the first time he didn't have a smart reply. The cruiser doors closed. The lights flashed, the scammers were gone. My wife let out a long breath and leaned into me. It's finally over, she whispered. I wrapped an arm around her. No, Deputy Miller said gently. Now it officially begins. We both looked at him. What do you mean? I asked. There will be paperwork, he said with a half smile. A lot of paperwork. My wife laughed weakly for the first time that day. It wasn't the laugh of someone who thought it was funny. It was the laugh of someone finally breathing again. And for the first time since the knock on the door, the house felt safe. The sound of the patrol car doors closing echoed across the quiet street like the final note of a long, unwanted song. Brad and Tyler were inside the back seat, their faces pale, their eyes stiff, their confidence completely gone. Just minutes earlier, they had walked up to my house full of fake authority, fake power, and fake courage. Now they sat behind reinforced glass, cuffed, shaking, and finally understanding exactly how close they had come to something far worse than arrest. Deputy Miller adjusted his duty belt and stepped toward me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I'm fine. He looked at my wife next. She stood beside me, holding my arm, still shaken but now breathing normally. The red mark on her cheek had started to fade, but the memory of the punch was still fresh in both our minds. Ma'am, Miller said gently, you handled that as well as anyone could. My wife tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. I just wanted them to leave, she whispered. I didn't think they would. Her voice trailed off, but everyone knew how that sentence ended. Deputy Reyes approached next, holding a clipboard with paperwork. I'll need your statements, he said, but take your time. No rush. Tyler's muffled voice suddenly came from inside the cruiser. This is crazy, he shouted through the closed window. It was just a misunderstanding. Brad hit him with an elbow. Shut up, man. Stop talking. Reyes rolled his eyes. They're going to make this worse on themselves. Deputy Miller stepped closer to the cruiser and spoke firmly through the glass. You two are being detained for assault, impersonating an officer, attempted extortion, and harassment. And that's just the start of the charges. Tyler's jaw dropped. What? We didn't assault anyone. Miller nodded toward my wife. You punched her. That's assault. It was an accident, Tyler yelled. It wasn't, my wife called back bravely. You hit me. You know you did. The cruiser went quiet. Brad looked down at his lap, ashamed, small, shrunken, a completely different man from the one who had tried to intimidate my wife moments earlier. He finally lifted his eyes and asked, barely loud enough to hear, Who is he? Her husband? What is he? Deputy Miller didn't miss a beat. He's a Navy SEAL, he said firmly, and he stopped you before you could do something even worse. Tyler's mouth fell open. Brad closed his eyes slowly, sinking into the seat as if he had just realized the full weight of his mistake. Inside the house, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Even the birds outside had gone quiet. The whole world seemed to pause, not out of fear, but out of relief. For the first time since this began, my wife wrapped her arms around me. She pressed her face into my chest, her voice soft and trembling. I was so scared, she said. I didn't think they would really hit me. I held her close. You're safe now, I said. They'll never come near you again. She nodded against my chest, letting out a breath she'd been holding since the moment she opened the door. Deputy Reyes approached us again. These guys weren't working alone, he said. We've had a few reports of fake HOA officers nearby. This might help us track down others, so this could have happened. To someone else? My wife asked. Reyes nodded. Yes, and next time the victim might not have someone trained like your husband there to protect them. The thought made her shiver. That's why your call was important, Miller added. You didn't just stop these two. You might have stopped their whole group. My wife looked stunned. I didn't think of that. You did more good than you realize, Miller said. The deputies stepped away to finish their paperwork near the patrol car. My wife and I stood together in the soft glow of the porch light, holding hands quietly. For several long seconds we said nothing, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, the kind of peaceful you only notice after. Danger has passed. The air felt clearer. The street felt wider. Our home felt safe again. Finally, the deputies walked back toward us. We'll take them down to the station now, Miller said. There will be follow-up questions and maybe a court visit. But you're protected. We've got this. Thank you, my wife said sincerely. You two take care, Reyes added. And if anyone else tries something like this... He nodded toward me with a half smile. They won't get far. The patrol car pulled away slowly, turning the corner and disappearing into the neighborhood. When the lights were finally gone, the street fell completely silent. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of safety, the silence of justice, the silence of peace returning to a home where it belonged. My wife leaned her head on my shoulder. It's really over, she whispered. Yes, I said, wrapping an arm around her. It's over. We went inside together and closed the door, not out of fear, but out of comfort. For the first time that day, our home felt like a home again.